Thank you all for your patience. Is that good miking? Thank you all for staying and staying throughout the day. So in case you are joining us new, which I actually see a lot of, I see some new faces. I'm Susan Stone. I'm the interim dean of the school. And I wanted to just, before I turn to this panel, I wanted to make three very brief remarks. One is just feeling the beauty of this community and all of its, the rich tapestry of the Berkeley alumni community is beautiful. And it was just lifted my spirits quite a lot. I was remiss when I didn't thank, we know that this fire scare has been quite scary, and I wanted to thank you all for coming out in the midst of what is really terrifying right now. And I think we're all wishing that for moisture and no wind at this point. And then finally, I wanted to remind those of you who are joining us on Zoom that we have Berkeley Principles of Community, and that we expect you to adhere to those during this telecast. So without further ado, I want to start this out by saying that I think that the misnomer, there's a little bit past, present, future here. And I wanted to, what our intention here, I think, was to think about the intergenerational and the multi-generational pipeline of our doctoral students and our faculty. And for those of you, our faculty probably has changed quite a bit. So what we wanted to do is use this as an opportunity to just do a little bit of reflection about your predictions for the future of social work. Laura Gomez is a doctoral student here in the School of Social Welfare. Her research interests are, how would we put it, Laura? Digital and more, technology and its effects on social work practices, policies, ethics, et cetera, broadly speaking. I'm also her doctoral chair, so I have to kind of pretend not to play favorites. Christina Lovato is an assistant professor here in our School of Social Welfare. She began here about a little over 2 years ago, really, almost 3. And Christina, Dr. Lovato really is focusing on intersections among child welfare populations, immigration, social work services and practices, and how they may or may not come together. Professor Adrian Aguilera is currently an associate professor in our school and probably has some interesting complementarities with Laura as you think about mental health services access using digital technologies. And then, of course, we have Professor Jill Dwyer-Barrick, very, very well known for her work on the child welfare system, its improvement, and I think many of you have come into contact with her teaching over time, which is just known as stellar. So I am going to just interview you all a little bit. They were prepped in questions, and this actually is a very beautiful intergenerational look. I think you planned that. Doctoral student, assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, about the arc of a career where those of us have centered research as our primary practice of social work. So, Laura, you're on the hot seat. What do you see the future of social work holding? Yeah, or you can turn it on. Yes.
Works? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I think there are two main points about this question that are important to address. One is the change in the more urgent priorities, what we prioritize in social work. That has to do with the change in the population in this country. So we're going to start likely prioritizing more immigrants and more child well-being and child health and mental health. I think those should be probably an aging population. That's very, very important for the future of social work. I think that has been historically deprioritized, and that needs to change, and that's going to change. I think that's one main thing. What is considered an urgent priority for the profession. What are the populations and the individuals that we will work harder to serve and serve effectively. And the other point, of course, coming from my background, my research background that Susan briefly mentioned, I think one other thing that is going to change drastically is how we use tools, how we use technology, what tools and what technology and for what and how, whether it's telehealth or virtual reality or AI, especially AI, is going to dramatically transform the profession in the decades to come. But that's up to us. That's up to the social work profession, practitioners, researchers like me, like us, and all of us collectively. What are we going to do to embrace AI, MBR, and other related technologies? And what are we going to do to embrace it in ways that are ethical, that are creative, that are proactive about actively engaging the populations that we're serving in co-creating those solutions that leverage those technologies. But it's really going to be up to us how we're going to, instead of pushing it away, how we're going to embrace it so we can improve our practice. Because these technologies have the potential to really transform our practice for the better, our research and our practice for the better. But it is up to us. We need to make a stance and work hard to ensure that we are moving forward the conversation and not just sitting back and taking it in. And yeah, that's what I would say. These two things are going to transform, in my opinion, transform social work.
I'm going to depart from our panel because I think it's it's actually a more logical follow-up. Given that future that you predicted, how are you personally planning on having an impact? And in what ways?
Well, I hope what I'm doing right now will have some short-term and maybe medium-term impact that could translate into more scholars in the future developing the work that I'm currently doing. But I think what I'm working on right now is really addressing the ethical questions of these new technologies from a social work perspective, because social workers haven't had that as a priority. So AI, for instance, will push the boundaries of what is considered ethical professional behavior, like no tomorrow. There's going to be many new ethical questions that come when we're using robotics to help the elderly, for instance. Like that's going to happen. So it's about how we're going to engage in those ethical conversations from the very beginning, right when those robots are being designed. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now, to push that conversation forward from a theoretical lens at this moment, but hopefully it would advance more conversations among social workers. And I think ideally, if I do become a professor, that's something that I will be teaching, to think about using tools in ethical ways, and also not just as a user or deployer of the technology, but as a designer of the technology. How do we make sure that we work in an interdisciplinary way, which we have not done historically, working with other disciplines and other, like engineering teams, for instance, we have not done them very well. And so I will be pushing that forward. I think that will be an agenda of mine.
Great. Christina, question again. Where do you see the future going and how do you play a role in it?
This is an exciting question. I think for all of us in the room, we're curious about this. I think as social work researchers, educators, practitioners, advocates, we have a really big responsibility to think about the future, right? I think we have a responsibility to think more interdisciplinary, more globally, in ways that really center human rights, that in ways that center child well-being. In particular, my research focuses on immigration and populations who are affected by that. And I think that social work has a real responsibility and opportunity to partner with allied fields such as law, such as public policy, such as public health, to really think about how issues such as the humanitarian crisis at the border that's been going on for a decade long now, how we can shape programs, shape policies so that we are really reaching the populations who need support and services most. In addition to that, I think social work has the unique opportunity to develop trauma-informed services, mental health services that really reach populations that might not otherwise have access to that. And I think thinking more broadly, more in a macro focus, I think social work has a responsibility to be more visible, to be more vocal when it comes to advocating at the state, federal level, to really push forward policies that end family separations, that end mass deportations, and again, that really center child well-being, human rights, family integrity. Yeah, and I'll stop there. And the second question, which is how is my work contributing to this? I'll travel back in time a bit. My social work career actually started as a practitioner, and I actually began most of my work here in the Bay Area. Actually, a couple of the different alum here have had a big impact in my career. Dimas Moncada from Círculo de Vida, and also Antonio, your work at Instituto Familiar de la Raza, which was a field placement of mine many years ago, have been significant and transformative in my career. It really opened up opportunities for me to serve the Latinx immigrant population. And so for the past 20 years, I have served this population in different contexts as a practitioner in the field, in mental health, school-based aspects, but also through research. And once I completed my practitioner career, I went on to investigate issues that were impacting the populations I was serving. So I wanted to understand more, how do forced family separations, which was exactly what my clients were going through, impact immigrant child and family well-being? So my research has focused on this particular issue for a number of years. I've worked in the community, community-based engaged research partnerships to understand these questions at a deeper level. I'd say in addition to that, my research has shifted a bit to focus now more on the issues that are impacting unaccompanied child migrants. So immigrant youth who are coming here on their own and who are trying to resettle in communities, schools, in our expensive Bay Area, and are struggling with issues of houselessness and just resettlement in general. So my current work looks at how our TAY, transitional age immigrant unaccompanied minors, navigating that dual transition to both adulthood and also, unfortunately, to an undocumented status. So that's what my work is currently looking at. I also have recently taken on the role as the director of the Center on Immigration and Child Welfare. And in the center's work, what we do is we produce original research. We also produce resources, development, and trainings to support child welfare agencies and other agencies who are engaged in this work of supporting immigrant children and their families. And in addition to that, we promote advocacy at the national level. So in addition to research, directing the center to bring more visibility and awareness to these issues that are impacting us here on the West Coast nationally, and then, of course, through teaching and engagement. So I will pass it on to Adrian. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all again for being here. I think it's nice to really reflect on all of this. And I think for transparency's sake, I actually wasn't trained in social work. I was trained in clinical psychology, but I've always felt a home working with social workers. And I think when I came here, I very much felt at home, that I didn't have to, justify the reasons for working with the most underserved, the most marginalized, and I could just get to work. And I think that's the beauty of social work. And it's also the challenge, is that I believe social workers have this lens where we see the complexity of issues, right? From the micro to the macro. And I think because of that, so much is asked of social work, right? Social workers represent the largest number of mental health practitioners in this country, right? Most of the mental health practice is done by social workers. But that's not all social workers do, right? Social workers run the child welfare system. Social workers are involved in policy, in administration, in so many things. And I think that this trend is likely going to continue. I think with most of my work is looking at developments in technology, and we know that we are going through a huge change, right? A huge technological revolution. There's questions about what things like AI are going to do to our society in terms of workforce, and there's questions of basic income, for example. All of these are so relevant to social work. In my work, specifically looking at mental health of the most marginalized, of the underserved, I look at it from two lenses. One is to improve the access to high quality services and interventions. So one piece is allowing people to get something, and then the second piece is making sure that these things are of high quality, right? And so a couple of the ways that my work contributes to that is, one, through research, and a little bit through practice and a workforce program. So I'm the director of the Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health Equity, which is funded by HRSA, the Healthcare Resources and Services Administration, I believe it is. And there, what we're trying to do is to improve the diversity of folks who make it through the doors of Haviland, and when they're here, that they're successful so that they can go out and meet the needs of an ever diversifying population, right? We need to match the needs of folks that are out there. For example, I work a lot with Spanish speakers, and there's a huge shortage of Spanish-speaking mental health providers, right? There's also a shortage of providers in other languages as well. So we need to continue to work to improve the quality of the workforce so that it matches the needs. That being said, today, and I suspect in the future, there will not be enough people available to provide the services that everybody needs. And that's one of the motivators for me working in using digital tools to expand, again, quality and access of interventions. But what we need to do is find a way to blend what the human can provide, that human connection that is irreplaceable, while adding to that with some of these tools to provide information, to provide content, to provide connection, so that we could get maximal benefit out of these limited human resources. And that's some of the work that I do in my research, and hopefully contributes to chipping away at a little part of the big problem.
Nice.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming home to Berkeley. Go Bears. It's so good to see so many Bears in the audience. So this is the past, the present, and the future. So what can I say about the past? And what can we all say about the past, since many of you are representing your past experiences here in Berkeley and you're still here, right? So social work is a really big tent. I've always thought of it as this enormous tent, right? We attend to every social problem that is discovered and all those social problems that have yet to be discovered. We will be the discoverers. We are broad because of that big tent, and we are deep because, as was mentioned, some of you are practicing in the micro level, direct practice. Some are doing meso level work. Just met Jonathan, meso level, macro level, right? So you're all in these different, John, meso level. So there are all these folks here in the audience who are doing different levels of practice, working across populations and across problems. That's not going to change. That's social work. That's the past, that's the present, and that's the future. What do we know about our past? Well, I teach undergrads in our program right now. They're so wonderful. They're so delightful, and they're so Berkeley, which you can put onto that whatever you want. Whatever that means to you, it's true. They're so wonderful. So one of the things you talk about in an intro class of social work is you talk about, is social work conservative or is it progressive? Is social work about cause? Is it about function? Is social work about micro or is it about macro? Is social work research qualitative or is it quantitative? And my students look at me and they say, do you people ever get along? Why are you always arguing about these things? Isn't it both and? So again, what do we know about the past? We have argued for years about something being better than the other, or something more important than the other, something that's more impactful than the other, something that's more right, something that's more righteous. We've been arguing for a century. So what do I imagine for the future? Same thing.
Oh.
Same thing. It's the moment we live in. We love to be combative. It's engaging as long as you don't take it personally and as long as you're not personal, as long as you're respectful and civil and responsive. It makes the light bulbs stay on because you're engaging in the world of ideas. And maybe it's not about better, but it's about different. And so that's engaging. So will that change now? So the future of social work is going to be more populations, more problems, a bigger tent. And that's good because it means we're being inclusive, we're being responsive, we're being equitable, we're being thoughtful about the world as it changes in the ways that we can make a difference. How is it going to be the same? We are all change makers. Every single one of us who got into this work did it somewhere in your soul. I am a change maker. I want to live in a better world. So that's not going to change. If it does, then we'll all leave the field, right? That's what keeps us together. That's the glue, and that's what's important about it. Our methods of research, they'll be different maybe. We'll bring in digital, which is awesome. So we'll have innovations, but we'll all keep doing the same thing. We'll all keep trying to make the world a little bit better, one by one, group by group, community by community, society by society. And that's what is so beautiful about social work, and that's what'll keep me in the game for a while. So I hope you stay in the game for a while too.
Okay, I'm going off script for 1 second. Jill and I have both, we've been around the block for a while here. And in our generation, I think we were really socialized around the fights, the dualities. And I love how our students are like, what are you guys doing? But I always worry in really troubled times. We know that social work has not always talked across boundaries in troubled times. And, I think a theme across Mimi's talk and what you have said, all of our panelists said here, is to dig down into how to find ways across boundaries when the world is also very this, that too. And so I have hope. I have hope that we learn about how do we come together in troubled times. And those might look very differently, but I like Mimi's quilt. How do we make this quilt and the pieces really engage authentically with each other? So, Susan, stop editorializing. How has social work changed over the course of your studies? What have you seen change in over this time period?
Do you want to start with me? I feel like I have the least to say because it's shorter.
But Jill's like, I don't think, maybe what has changed,
Okay.
maybe some things haven't changed all that much.
So I also did not start out in social work. I started out in the nonprofit sector and then the tech sector. So I kind of had a very weird mix of backgrounds when I came into social work. And I always knew I wanted to do research. I did try direct service. I started my career direct service and nonprofit, but research has always been, it speaks to me more because it's just my skill set and yeah, that's just where I navigated to. And so I will speak about research. I don't know, I'm not on the ground these days. I have 2 little kids, so I haven't practiced in a while. So I cannot speak for on the ground, like practitioner, what is happening there. But in terms of research, or those kind of like conversations around Haviland Hall or within the student body, I feel like there has been a shift towards more, since I started, when was it, 2019? Yeah, like before the pandemic. So it's not too long, but I have noticed there's a shift towards more of community engagement conversation that was not there when I started as a PhD student or even as an MSW student. It was not really ingrained in us to really push for that kind of approach to research, to engage communities in our work, to make sure we're asking feedback, and also, our research methods have changed, I think, towards that more qualitative, I think, way of, not necessarily that it's not quantitative, but there has been more of an embrace of mixed methods, qualitative approach of making sure that we're engaging communities in our work, that we're not just in our silos or here in academia, in Haviland during our research, we're not talking to people. And so I think that has been a change I've noticed. Now it's actually almost expected. The new PhD students that I talk to, they almost kind of like expect that they're going to be doing some of that in their research. So I would say that's the big change that I've seen. But again, it's just been like 5 years or so.
I think what I've noticed is that social work as a career is reevaluating its identity. I think social work has been looking back a bit to see where have we been. I think it's going through kind of an identity change a bit where we've been looking at some of the tough places that we maybe started out, right? And the ways in which maybe we've had, I think just some challenging pain points that our field has been in. And it's really important and necessary for our field to be reevaluating this. This is coming through, I'll say, in areas of child welfare, reevaluating the practices, reevaluating some of the systemic policies and ways in which communities have been interfacing and or disproportionately interfacing with the child welfare system. So I think it's important. I think it's really great and needed that as a field, social work looks back so that we can then, with a more intentional vantage point, look forward and plan our present and future. So I think it's necessary. I think we see social work becoming more multi-level in where we've talked about past silos of being more micro, or you're more meso, or you're more macro. Now we're embracing this more multi-level approach, more of a community engaged approach, thinking more about ethics in how we engage in research and in practice. I think we're thinking more binationally or transnationally in terms of how we engage with populations across the globe. I would say those are the things that come to mind.
I think in some ways, I think society's seen the value of social work a bit more over the years since I've been here. And again, I think that's a kind of a blessing and a curse in that I think social work is expected now to be involved in so many arenas. I think we've seen that quite a bit in police reform, for example, right? So bringing in social workers. And I think, one of the challenges is for all the problems of society, bring in social work, bring in social work, bring in social work, right? But I think the question is beyond, it's maybe more of a superficial valuing, right? Rather than really making social workers part of the conversation. And I think we're heading in that direction, but I think there's more work that needs to be done. I see it a bit, in the world of, I'm in the world of the intersection of mental health and technology. And I think, admittedly, when I started this work, I think social workers kind of pushed back even, said, no, we don't want to do that stuff. We're here to work with people, right? And I think the beauty of that, I think a lot of us feel that. That's we came into this work to work with people, not to work with machines, right? Otherwise, we would have been engineers. And I think that holding true to that is extremely important. And at the same time, there's been a slow movement because we're being pushed by the realities. I think COVID really was a big push in terms of saying, oh, we have no choice but to do things differently. And what I really hope is, maybe I'm skipping to the next one, but I really hope that social work becomes more and more a part of these conversations, because I think when we think about, for example, equity and technology, I think we have all these tech companies that are developing all these things, but they're so out of touch with the realities that so many of us know. And with that huge chasm, any potential benefits won't be realized, right? And I think social work really needs to be at the table, as much as sometimes we hate all that stuff and we see the downsides, and there's absolutely downsides. I think those downsides, can be even worse if social workers are not at the table. And I think we're moving in that direction. I've seen it. And hopefully we see more of that.
I'm not sure how to answer this question, just because I think that depending upon if we have a big umbrella and we're all walking into a tent, that was a metaphor. If we have a big tent and we're all walking into the tent through a different door, all of us in this room, then we probably have a different perspective on what we've seen and what have been the big changes, because it sort of depends on your field and your population and the issue you're attending to, and whether it's been discovered, whether it's in the process of being discovered, whether it hasn't been discovered yet. So what I say may not resonate with you at all, and that's okay, because I walked in one door. So my door would say that I think one of the biggest changes I've seen over my career was the embrace of evidence, and that the revelation in our field that we are needed and we are wanted, and we do, but most of the time we have no idea whether we make a difference in any empirical way. We know we make a difference. We know we walk away from interactions with other human beings, and we can tell from that interaction that something is shifted, of course. But did things really change? We don't have very much evidence in most, depending upon the door you went in most of our fields. And so for a while, I was extremely excited because I was seeing the field embrace evidence. We have to engage in more really good quality research to understand whether it was better to get X than to get Y. It was better to get X than to get nothing. that there was a comparison. And I think that we're kind of in that flavor of the month field where that flavor is now chocolate and we're on to strawberry. So I don't know that there's much enthusiasm for that to the same degree that I saw about 10 years ago. I worry about that. I worry that we're going to be wanted and we're going to be needed and we're going to do, but without that sort of drive that we all have to make sure that we know that what we do is making the difference we intended, that, you know, is that as good as it gets? I don't know. So I worry, right? I go to my doctor. He says, you need a new knee. Well, he didn't. He said, I needed a new hip. I said, okay, but what's the evidence? What's the evidence? And he gave it to me. And he was right. I mean, he had this article and that, like he had the evidence. It was going to make a fundamental difference. And it did. When clients come to us, can we say, if you talk to me 3 times, something's going to get better? I think we need to keep pushing that envelope. I think we need to push at continuing to figure out whether or not it's going to take 3 meetings or 10 or none, so that we can say to clients with more certainty, you are going to make the changes you wanted in your life because we had an interaction that involved these activities. So we can disagree if you want to in a friendly way, but that's where I think that we have been. That's where we're sort of lagging, and that's where I hope we go again in the future.
Oh, thank you. As you know, 20 years from now, and we are going to be 100, not as a building, but as a school of social work. We'll catch up to our building's age. What do you imagine we will be celebrating in 20 years?
I'm just curious, what was here before, for the 20 years before the social work school was hosted, became?
I think we were, what you mean Haviland Hall?
Yeah, what was happening?
I think we were many things, but I think we were a school of education at one time.
Thank you. I was just curious. Yeah, this is a tough question for me. It's ironic because I think I do research on technology and social impact, but I try not to think too much about the future, and I'm not good at it. I'm not a good planner. So this is a tough, particularly difficult question for me, but I think I want to, along the lines of what Jill was saying, of what worries you, what are some of the things that worry you. I wish that the school of social welfare, our school, could really embrace the technological shift that is about to come in the most intentional, creative, and engaging way for students. I'm talking about education, social work education. I wish that in 20 years, we're celebrating that we are doing a great job using all these technological tools to improve education and to really and take it a step forward for the profession, for using, for instance, virtual reality to teach certain practices that we cannot think of doing right now. So being really forward thinking, I think I will be really happy if the school meets that in 20 years, because I worry that we're going to fall behind from the education perspective. Let alone research or practice, but just from an education perspective, that we're not thinking along those lines, whereas other professions are. And yeah, I will be happy with that celebration.
Thank you. I think in 20 years, we will be celebrating the multiple ways in which our school has empowered students, practitioners, alum, the opportunities to dismantle system inequities. So I think all of you are perfect examples of folks who have been trained here at Berkeley and who are really leading in the field to train others to come up and to think broadly in multi-level ways about how to address system inequities, how to dismantle ways that are not working for others, and really how to produce important policies, important practices that shape our families, the lives of our children, those who we serve, the most disenfranchised populations. So I think we'll be celebrating your successes, the successes of faculty members who have gone on to produce incredible research that has changed and shaped the field. I think we'll be celebrating our doctoral students and our bachelor's and master's students, again, who have gone out and worked in and developed and been leaders and brilliant thinkers to develop and to promote innovative ways of doing social work.
So I really think and hope we'll be celebrating the leaders of that time. And I think in a lot of ways it's reflective, I think, of what we, tried to do, and I think we're successful in that we're really, folks, the faculty here at least, are really focusing on the cutting edge issues of today, right? The things that are relevant today. And that's one of the things I think makes this place so special. And we don't know what those issues are going to be in 20 years, but I know that the people here are going to be addressing those issues and trying to figure them out. You know, Christina's working on immigration, maybe a little bit relevant these days. I think so. Jamie's working on homelessness. Again, maybe relevant. Anu's working on reproductive rights. Right, the child welfare system's all figured out, right? We really have people at the forefront of the things that matter socially, and I think the beauty is that we confront the most challenging issues, right? Not the easiest issues. I have a lot of colleagues who develop studies that are very easy to do. They're designed nicely. Folks here don't think that way. We think, what are the best questions to answer? What are the best ways to answer them? Let's do it that way. Not because it's easy, because it's the right way to do things. And I really hope that ethos continues as we go along. I'm confident that it will.
The only thing I would add, I love all of these, I agree with them all, is looking back to 20 years ago, our classrooms were not as diverse as we wanted them to be. Today, it's breathtaking. Our students are extraordinary. Will they be even more diverse in 20 years? On every dimension of identity, yes, because we want that. And because we wanted that 20 years and we got it, and we're in the right direction. 20 years ago, we did not have a diverse faculty. Today we do. Will it be more diverse in 20 years? Yes, because that's what we want, and that's where we're going. Those are just two examples of goals that we set 20 years ago, where we said we want it to be different than it is today. Yes. And 20 years later, it is different than it was. And so I have every faith that this faculty will set their goals for what it is they want to see. Not this faculty, this school community will set their goals for what they want to see, and we will realize that cutting edge, responsive, technologically thoughtful, diverse, equitable. It's a beautiful place, and it's just going to keep getting more beautiful.
Thank you. You know what's so beautiful about this panel? Who knew how this would go? I was like, you know what? Beautiful talking points. And thank you for covering the blanket of the issues that are embedded in these questions, from students to practice to research. And so we have about 10 more minutes. I would love to turn questions over to our community. They can be of our panelists, or you know what? You could answer one of the questions. Like, what's the future hold? Where are you playing a role in it? What's changed? What do you hope for the future?
Well, I have a question, and this is not meant to be political, but it is addressing, I wrote, how is social work going to deal with the other 50% of the population feeling that they have been betrayed by the other 50%? How is this going to affect and impact relationship, families, friends? Talking about AI, this makes it almost impossible to avoid this situation because everybody's aware of what's going on, and everybody's aware that this is going to cause some big impact in our society.
Comments, panelists? Okay. This is, I think, the big issue. This is a big issue of our time. I worry about it all the time because I think we are in a world that is probably the most unsettled I've seen in my lifetime. And it is unsettled in ways and in fractals of power that I haven't quite seen in my lifetime, too. And you're talking about the convergence of global changes in technology. We're talking about the illiberal turn, not just in this country, but nationally. We're talking about the erosion of trust in any public institution. And we understand that there are important critiques. We have, one half will say the institutions that were developed to serve betrayed those who they were meant to serve. On the other hand, you'll have folks like, please don't throw away public systems of care. Like, what is our common public good? And I think maybe what you're asking to me or to the panel is, what is our new vision of a public good? I don't know that we know what this new vision of a public good is, and I'm very worried that we're not having the kind of conversations that lead us to a public good. Andrew Abbott, a sociologist of social work, he's a little known. Nobody listened to him when he said it. He's like, social work is beautiful because it is a profession of the boundaries, okay? And we have always gotten worried about keeping those boundaries in some ways, or the ways we've defined those boundaries has bounded us. He said, you know what? Embrace the fact that you are in between the boundaries, and it is in tough times you must figure out how to talk across boundaries. And I think those sensibilities also have, you see those in indigenous men, like, get us to the table. It's not just getting to the table. It's not access and equal access. The next step is talking across those boundaries. And so I think all of us have said this in different ways. Mimi illustrated this in the quilt of the ways that we can think we're doing good, like really thinking about what our values are and interrogating them, bringing the different ways we come to this. And that is a very disciplined practice. So my hope for us is to listen to what Andrew Abbott says. He's like, don't rely on any one of the things. It's not going to be enough to rely on your values. It's not going to be enough to rely on your research evidence. It's relying on all of those and using them to have conversations or bring things that seem incommensurate together in new ways. I don't know if that's very satisfactory. And I'd love to hear what others think. Great.
I will let you find the common thread. But as I hear you speak, all of you, about the current demand of mental health services, I cannot help but think how to integrate everything that's been said when there's a call that I receive from a daughter who's asking for telehealth family services because two sisters are out of state.
Yeah.
And the only way that they can engage in family therapy, because they're all collaborating to take care of an aging mother with mental health services along with Alzheimer's, which came first, we will never know, are denied services, so to speak, because I'm licensed in California.
Yep.
But we're doing telehealth.
Yep.
And my credential or my license does not allow me to provide services out of the state. But I do find a provider that has a license to practice in, say, North Dakota. But they can only engage with half of the family. And I'm not going to go there in terms of that other person who's calling me, who is the designated care provider, who is here from Costa Rica. And she's sending money to Costa Rica for the brother and the rest of the family to take care of her aging mother. And here we are doing telehealth.
Maybe I'm going off subject, but it's been 37 years that we, the class of '89, started here. And my question is in regards to neuroscience. And I see, where are we here with teaching that? It's so important. And you talk about interdisciplinary practice, going through a 15-month fellowship on infant and early mental health services several years ago and becoming endorsed here in California. That experience was life altering. And that's when I really, truly understood and live what is interdisciplinary practice. So I also think that in terms of child welfare, I mean, social welfare, social work, education, that is a big need. I don't see it. I teach at Cal State Long Beach, and I love Long Beach. But I think I've talked to other colleagues, and that's not being addressed. And I think it's crucial. And Dimas, I don't know if you want to talk about your work, your clinical work, and how you've seen it.
Yeah, thank you. I heard the question about finding boundaries, challenging boundaries, redefining boundaries. And I think it was said that we are at a point in our profession where we are facing that challenge. And I thought to myself, no, we were facing that challenge when I studied here in a different way. Today it's AI, today it's technology. Back then it was whether we were going to do clinical practice or community practice. It came in different ways, but the challenge was there. And my development, my professional development is a little bit the opposite of Dr. Aguilera in that I started social work, loved social work, but became aware that I was missing a piece of the puzzle by understanding the context of the individual in the community, by not fully understanding what was happening in these 6 inches in people's heads. So I went and got trained in psychology. And putting it together, and Maria's question about the kind of the whole neurology and everything that's involved with how that is involved in the individual and building community, building groups, building families, and so forth. And bringing it to the topic of the future and technology. My own particular specific, very, very specific, small sample, I agree, experience is this. I stopped doing therapy with children and families 4.5 years ago because All I could do was do telehealth because of COVID. I have been doing children and family for over 35 years. I love doing children and family work. I could not find a way to do it in a way that felt comfortable to me, in a way that felt ethical to me. Why? Because of what Maria was saying. How do I sit on the floor? How do I lay down on the floor and play with Legos, play a game board on telehealth with a 6-year-old? How do I keep the attention of 3 kids, different age ranges, different developmental stages? The mom, the dad, the pot of beans is boiling over on the stove, and they're trying to stay on the screen with me. I said, no, I can't do this because I don't feel it's effective. I've continued working with couples, with adults in couples and with adults, and I've had to go back into my library of knowledge about how to engage, because with kids, the rapport building was so important for the therapy to work. With adults, it's as important, but there's more material to work with. And then with adults on the screen, I had to improvise their culture, shared lived experiences, things that we have in common to activate in them and to help them relate to, whether it be language, whether it be their experiences, lived experiences of the LGBTQ community, whether it be that I'm a man, they're men, and so forth. So I had to improvise, and a lot of the report building has to be very creative, and those are the challenges that I don't know, and you guys are the experts studying this, how it's going to be addressed through telehealth, through AI. I think of Bowlby, and the plush versus the nourish. The little monkeys, baby monkeys, they chose the plush comfort versus the food for those neural circuits to be developed and enforced and so forth. How do we do that through telehealth? So, anyway.
Ooh. There's a question.
Thank you so much for this panel. It's good to look at ways how we deal with the future of social work. And knowing that the population is getting older and the pyramid is getting more flat, we also have more needs for healthcare, not just in the space of doctors or nurses or therapists, but also clinical social workers. And then also in the space of how we deal with behavioral health intervention. In preparation for the future in 20 years, what do you think in Haviland that the curriculum be shaped in such a way that all these social workers graduated from this program will be ready to deal with these emerging needs?
Uh-oh, everybody's looking at me. I'm just interim.
I teach some of that, so I can talk a little bit to it. I think, we don't know exactly what the changes are going to be, but I think that one of the really important things that I think we try to do here is not only teaching content knowledge, which is very important, right, to learn facts and things like that, but it's also learning how to think, how to ask questions, right? So when I teach my course in how to do therapy, it's not, I try not to teach it in a way where I'm saying, this is how you do it. This is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But instead to try to understand what are the principles, right? What are the behavioral principles? What is the evidence behind why these things work, right? And the more we can teach students how things function, what works and why it works, then what we're setting up is this really nice ability to be flexible out there so that then when new tools are developed, they can be integrated into a foundation that understands why and how things work as opposed to just how to use this one tool, if that makes sense, right? So I often tell students, instead of teaching them how to follow a recipe with cooking, I'd like to teach them the principles of the food that you're cooking and why you're doing that, right? And then you're gonna be able to be much more flexible, much more creative, because you're gonna face people that are also gonna be quite different. So I think that perspective is something that I think will continue to follow as all of this changes, because we can teach students about today and they're still gonna be in the field in 20 years and things are gonna be quite different. Hopefully the foundation that we leave can provide some of that.
Yeah, I think we're done. Oh, there's another question.
Our final question / comment.
Thank you very much. I heard Lauren and Adrian said that the integration of AI and technology, like everything new in our practice of social work. And I have a question that I learned there's many AI products like AI therapist, EmoGPT, things like that we have like AI therapists who provide assessment and therapy for people like via text-based, like online, these products. How do we collaborate with these AI products? What's the challenges and opportunities for us? I'm really curious about that.
So yeah, that's an open question. I'm working on that right now, and I'm looking at it from the policy perspective, because that's where usually the levers of power are in policy, and that's where you got to start. I mean, like in order for a true these interdisciplinary mechanisms to be established, there's got to be willingness from the top for it to happen. There are some pilot projects that I've heard of where you have social workers collaborating with technologists and other disciplines to do research and develop products. But they're very limited amount, a small number. Nothing at a grand scale. Nothing is happening in Berkeley really, which is baffling. And so I myself, I'm working with the engineering school. I'm working with other social science disciplines to start those conversations and make that participation of social work a reality. And so I can tell I'm working on that, but it's not happening on a decent enough scale or the way it should be happening. And in terms of tools, everything is right now being deployed without proper vetting. Like Adrian said, corporations, companies in Silicon Valley create these products and they just sell them to government agencies or nonprofits, or even to just themselves release them into the public, like ChatGPT, and they haven't done proper testing, safety testing, and then ethical concerns that should have been considered before release are being addressed after release, which is unacceptable. And so I hope my biggest contribution will be to ensure that, yes, we use AI for social work, but it needs to be, like Jill was saying, with evidence and with ethical guardrails and legal guardrails from the beginning, from the design, not just after deployment, because that's too late. And that's why social workers and communities, individuals and communities, should be involved from the beginning. So that's my hope. And it's not really happening right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. There's so many. I did want to say, address your question, Derek, about education. As I've been thinking, we don't know very much about how social work entry-level professionals fare when they get into the field. We do know how medical professionals fare when they get into the field, right? Like, how do they do? What kinds of things come up to them? And I think what we know from medicine, whether we think it's a great model for social work, is most graduating doctors make errors because they go beyond what they know. They're practicing beyond what they should be doing. And the answer that most of us don't like to give is like, I don't know. I don't know. And I think that ties in to what Adrian's saying, like, how do you think, and are you confident to say, we actually don't know this very well. It's okay not to know. Here's what we do know. Here's where I'm skeptical, because I think a lot of the issues we touch, there isn't going to be a ton of evidence around them, but then bringing that full circle is a part of it. And I know that there's a lot of other ways to think about how we pace the content knowledge and the practice knowledge through more simulated learning, doing things where we practice. How we sequence content versus practice, how to stimulate on your feet decision making without, I think are some of the exciting areas I want us to do. And it's giving students really hard problems and saying, uh-oh, what do you do? It's not clear. We don't fit into, so hopefully integrating those kinds of things would be the way, one of the ways we might do that. We're over time. Dora is looking at me skeptically. I wanted to thank you all for taking time on this day to come back and visit Haviland and to meet us. I hope this is one of many more efforts to engage the community as we recover from COVID and as we pivot Haviland into its future. And this was just delightful for me. I feel very uplifted, and I thank you for being in community with us today.